This podcast is being recorded on Thursday, October the 15th, and the title of this week's podcast is One Small Step, hopefully. Anyway, welcome, and we're so glad you could join us. I'm Larry Jackson, co-owner of Cruise Holidays of Viera, and I'll be your host for this week's edition of Just Cruisin'. And we are the travel podcast magazine that's brought to you each week by Cruise Holiday Planning Store located in Melbourne, Florida, with the phone number of 321-242-1331 and the web in Viera, justcruisinviera.com. And or you can just Google Larry Jackson and it'll bring it up to you. It should come up on Google on the first page. Just a quick reminder, if you're listening to the podcast through one of our many venues that produce our podcast, I want to let you know that you can watch it if you also want to. We have a video edition which is located on YouTube, and you can get that by linking to there's a link on our webpage to that video podcast. So if you'd rather see me in person rather than just listen, then please go to our webpage, which is justcruisinviera.com. Well, where are we this week? Let's see. Our current status is we have a no-sale order from the CDC, and the CDC's no-sale order extends through October 31st. We have all of the major cruise lines with a voluntary suspension of services through November 30th, and that's our status right now. Now, what's happened since we last talked? A couple of things. Previous week, that was supposed to be an in-person meeting, but after the president tested positive for COVID-19, it became a virtual meeting between Vice President Mike Pence, 5 cruise lines executives, which were the CEO of Royal Caribbean, Richard Fain, CEOs from Carnival, Norwegian, MSC, were on with the Secretary of Human and Health Services, Albert Redfield, who, by the way, says that masks are better COVID-19 than as a vaccine. So just to give you a little bit of credibility there. The meeting, I guess, to discuss, also on the line was the person who headed the Set Healthy Sail panel, the former governor of Utah, Leavitt, and he was the one that headed this panel, which I've told you about in the past, which was created by Royal Caribbean in conjunction with Norwegian Cruise Lines, the parent companies of those. Basically, the cruise line, the highlights of their Healthy Sail panel, 74 key steps. These are 74 protocols. It takes up 66 pages that I've relayed to you, several of these in the past, such as masks being worn in common areas on the ship where social distancing is not feasible, % testing of all crew members and passengers before boarding, increased ventilation protocols such as more different types of screens and more fresh air being pumped into the ship. According to the reports of the meeting, Vice President Pence gave a brief overview of the current state of the no-sale order and highlighted the shared goal of reopening the maritime. Thanked Governor Leavitt, the cruise lines executives, for conducting an industry-driven effort that focuses on the health outcome. And again, it was a commemoration society, I guess, because the cruise then thanked the Trump administration for its collaborative approach, thanking each other for nothing. The collective proposal will now be presented to the task force, the Vice President of CDC's no-sale order. Now, it's not mentioned in here how long any of that's going to take. My guess is none of it will happen before the election on November 3rd. Thought it's also strange, 74 protocols. I can't believe he's getting into this minutia. Is he then going to order the CDC to say, well, we don't care what the president says, we're going to continue these no-sale orders. So anyway, continuing the article here, the meeting covered a variety of topics, including testing for passengers and crew members and the use of shorter itineraries. One of the 74 protocols is cruises. That's what End of October, the CDC will either lift or extend its ban. I'm sure they're going to extend it. And in the meantime, the cruise lines are in Royal Caribbean blog site that several crew members were saying that they were headed back to Florida to resume back on. So many indications in the past that turned out to be false starts when they had no intention of lifting the no sail order. So I wouldn't put too much credence in the fact that they're bringing crew members back. Now, right after the October 30th no sail order was issued, Royal Caribbean and Norwegian threw in the towel. Then came out and they said, well, we're going to cancel all of our cruises through November except for 6 cruises out of Miami and Port Canaveral. This meeting, the Carnival threw in the towel also and said, okay, we're suspending everything through the end of November because it's obvious that's sad and different. Again, we continue to operate in this vacuum. And I guess that's the most frustrating thing for the whole industry is we're just in complete limbo with no say so now, and then we can all be on our way. Okay, just a reminder that Just Cruising, the podcast, is brought to you each. And why should you care about that? Well, you should, because what I would like to urge you to do is start thinking about your vacation plans and to start booking them, because several factors are going on. From Royal Caribbean that said that the 2021 bookings have improved over the last 2 months, and next year the pricing is actually going to be up slightly from before. They also reported that Alaska is going to be a very popular destination. We're finding that more people want to cruise closer to home. And we have a lot of people that wanted to cruise that weren't able to, that are now moving their cruises to 2021. Then we have people who want to take cruises that weren't already booked in 2020. So Alaska positioned to make Alaska cruises because of delays of getting crews here, or getting the ships back through the Panama Canal or wherever they're at up to Alaska. So we're probably going to have less cabins available. So I'm urging people to, if you've got any inkling that you want to go to Alaska next year, boutique store, there's my wife, Linda, my lovely and gracious wife, Linda, and I, and our admin assistant, Wendy. What that means to you is that you get very personalized attention from a small shop, but it's big enough to handle all of your travel needs. And we are available at 321-242-1331. On our web, Dreaming About Alaska. Again, it's a wonderful, wonderful place. Also, don't forget, almost all the cruise lines have these Cruise with Confidence now, that if you book a cruise you change your mind up to 48 hours before sailing, you can cancel it and get a future cruise, 100% future cruise credit. So we don't cruising again. The Royal Caribbean blog this week came out with a interesting article, and they said that there are 3 things that need to go right for cruises to resume in the U.S. The first one that they laid to you before, we have several cruises that are going out almost on a weekly basis from MSC Cruises, and very soon on Costa Cruise Lines, and TUI, which is the German cruise line, which is a subsidiary of Royal Caribbean. And to see an outbreak on any of the European sailings, they're using the same safety protocols. A problem there would create. These cruises in Europe are basically our guinea pig, and hopefully we can demonstrate to the CDC that we can cruise safely. I don't know if this is possible, because in the last no sail order, the CDC cited all of these on our European cruises as one of the reasons they're extending the Europe there, but we all have to listen to the science when the science says no. Okay, the second thing that needs to go right for us to resume cruises is that there be no dramatic rise in the case count here in Florida. It says another potential start plans is ports, that being Miami, Port Canaveral, and Fort Lauderdale. They see a lot of put the health care infrastructure at risk. I saw a report the other day that our hospitalizations here in Florida are down 70% from COVID, down 70% from where they. So we are not taxing our healthcare system. That's if, and I guess they tested positive, and we have. This is things that would be in the. And as far as I can tell, the last 4 or 5 weeks, the case count in Florida has, and so that's a good sign that continues. And then the final thing that needs to go right is that the CDC will either lift or extend its ban. So podcasts, I have a go into place that has to happen for us to restart. No sale order. Why we have a no sale order for cruises and we don't have a no fly order, and we don't. CDC's biased that they're obviously forget this picking on the cruise lines is first those people who are obviously biased, and that's number two are the ports of call, whether they're going to let us into the ports of call. Now some of that can infect a local population by doing that. Another article that came across this week were that Singapore has decided that they're going to allow Royal Caribbean with the ocean getaways in Singapore. Royal Caribbean is going to be offering the Quantum of the Seas. The Taiwan-based Dream Cruises will also be starting. They're proposing November 6th. I think Royal is proposing to start after that, 50%. And so these will again be pilot sailings. This will help us in our cause if things go well. And there are no outbreaks. This will be another thing that we can demonstrate to the CDC that we can operate cruises safely. Interesting article I saw this week. They've had in a matter of hours, they got over 6,000 bookings for these new cruises. Very interesting in this article, though, and we here at Just Cruising try to spot trends before they happen. And we've been seeing a trend where several hotels in Europe and a couple of resorts in the Caribbean have been offering and MSC Cruises is considering doing this also in Europe, where they're offering a COVID insurance policy, which would be included in the fare. It's not an additional charge. And what it does, it will cover COVID-19 related costs for onboard medical costs, any required quarantine, and travel home. So we may be seeing this as a restart provision for our own cruise lines here in America. So that should be interesting if that's going to happen. Showing you some of the positive signs that are happening. That's why I entitled this One Small Step. We are getting these little tiny baby steps that are going around around the world, and we are seeing some indications of people wanting to get back to travel. Here's another one. Qantas has proposed a 7-hour flight. They only are doing this one time. It's a sightseeing flight on Qantas on a Dreamliner 787. The trip sold out in 10 minutes. The CEO of Qantas said it's probably the fastest selling flight in Qantas history. So there's seems to be some pent-up demand there. We also saw this last week the TSA report screened by the TSA people. That's the highest daily total since mid-March. The same thing that happened on the 11th, and also on the 9th of October there was a similar spike in number of passengers, which making it the busiest travel weekend for 7 months. Just to give you some frame or reference here, this was just under 1 million passengers they screened on October 11th. On that same day last year, they screened 2.5 million passengers. So it gives you an idea of what's going on there. And one of the things I do want to, as we talk about reopening, one of the things you can expect is going to happen, and I haven't seen this in the protocols anywhere, but this week we booked some on a land tour to basically Arizona and the Grand Canyon next year. And the land tour operation sent us a health and safety waiver release form from liability for travel with the company. And I'm just bringing this up again. We're trying to spot trends here. You can anticipate you're going to have to be signing one of these for future travel. Maybe it's going to be with the cruise lines also. And here are some of the things listed in this health and safety waiver release from liability for travel. Assumption of risk. Number one, you understand that there are certain dangers, hazards, and risks inherent in any travel experience, and you knowingly and fully accept such dangers, hazards, and risks, including but not limited to, and then they list 14, 16 things here that can go wrong, such as acts of God, water or power shortages, war, quarantine, riots or civil unrest, strikes or labor disputes. I guess these are things we all kind of knew could happen, but I've never seen them all delineated in one place. Number 2 paragraph of this health and safety waiver, you are aware that medical facilities while traveling may not be of the quality of medical facilities you experience at home, and access to evacuation and or suitable medical supplies available as you are accustomed to. Number 3, you are aware of the COVID-19 pandemic and related government laws, regulation, orders, and directives and guidelines. Okay, that's going to be our job as travel advisors to let you know about that. But I just wanted you to be aware that this might be something that you're going to be faced with in the future, along with, I can guarantee you're going to have to take a COVID-19 test within 72 hours to travel. One other article I ran across this week was, I read a variety of different news sources to kind of gauge not only what the travel industry, how they're viewing this whole cruise shutdown, but how others are viewing it, and especially the stock market, because the cruise line stocks have been incredibly volatile. Another development that happened this week was Royal Caribbean announced, this is the parent company of Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines, Azamara, Silver Sea, and Celebrity Cruise Lines, that they're going back into the market to raise another $1 billion worth of funds. As we've been telling you in the past, the cruise lines have been going into the market to borrow money to keep the lines afloat during this period when there's no revenue coming in, which makes the cruise lines what we call a zombie corporation. Their only thing that they're doing is borrowing money to pay debt. So there's nothing happening as far as that's concerned. But they announced they're going to go back into the market with a $500 million common stock offering. So they're going to fully continue to dilute the stock, and a $500 million offering of senior convertible notes, which means that all of those are convertible into common stock, further dilute the stock. So that's not really good news for the stockholders. The stock fell on that news, but rallied again. We're not sure why the cruise lines are continuing this, but one of the groups that I read is Motley Fool, which is basically a stock analysis firm. Kramer is another person I've been reading to kind of just to get a third-party view of what they're saying about the reopening of cruises. And here's what Motley Fool said earlier this week. Now the cruise industry becomes an election risk, especially if COVID-19 cases show no sign of subsiding. Joe Biden isn't necessarily an enemy of cruise lines, but the CDC would feel less pressure to soften its hard stance if it knew that the White House was in the process of being handed off. Pulling the plug on November means historically lucrative holiday season sailings are next on the chopping block. The CDC doesn't seem to be warming up to the idea of reopening the cruise industry, and now we're running out of calendar pages before 2021 is here. So just another view of what's going on with the cruise lines. Well, on a little bit brighter note, there is an effort out there, which I haven't seen much press on in the mass media other than in our travel, in our industry news. And it's an effort called Common Pass. And it is a digital health screening tool. and it's being developed by the nonprofit Commons Project Foundation and the World Economic Forum, neither of which I'm familiar with. 37 countries, along with the CDC and Customs and U.S. Border Protection, are participating in the project. Now, this is how it's going to work. Travelers would take a COVID-19 test at a certified lab, upload their results to their phones, and complete any additional health screening questions that their destination requires. Common Pass will verify the traveler has met the destination's requirements and generate a QR code that can be scanned by airlines and border officials. Dr. Martin Cetron, director of the CDC's Division of Global Migration and Quarantine, said in a statement that the CDC is eager to learn from the Common Pass pilot, as it could be one of the many potential tools that may one day contribute to a safe, responsible, and healthy global air travel experience. Notice he doesn't mention carnival or cruises. He only mentions air travel. I think that's important. The Common Pass system will be tested this month with Cathay Pacific and United Airlines on flights between London, Newark, Hong Kong, and Singapore. Although it's unclear at this point who will pay for the broader implementation, he said, the person who's in charge of the project said he imagines it would be a cost that airlines would pass on to travelers. That's been one of the questions I've been asking about the cruise lines, mandating that everybody have a COVID-19 test before they get on board the ship, and who's going to pay for that. I haven't gotten any answers for that either. So just another reason that if you think cruising is going to go down in pricing, it's probably not, because we're not going to have that many cruises, and demand seems to be pretty high. Well, there was also another virtual conference. This seems to be all anybody's doing among the several folks from different cruise lines at Sea Trade Cruises. Is a industry organization, and they had a virtual conference last week, looking in the crystal ball, trying to figure out what the travel would look like in October of 2021. And this is basically the summary of what the cruise lines executives said. Cruising will have a chance to shine thanks to gold standard protocols and technologies will have helped. This is what's going to happen in October 2021, will have helped accelerate recovery, while pent-up demand from loyalists will be key. And though non-cruisers may have been scared off by the events of 2020, there might be a chance to draw new people should cruising prove a safer option than other kinds of travel, given the commitment of 100% testing and the other protocols. That's one of the aims of the whole of the Healthy Sail Panel. Of these protocols is that we make cruising the absolute safest way to see the world. I believe we can do that because we have a long experience with a very nasty virus, much worse than COVID-19, which is norovirus. And we have done a masterful job of containing that from a few years ago, where we had lots of outbreaks on lots of ships, to it's become an extremely rare occurrence. And we worked very hard. We followed the science. We in the cruise industry, because I consider myself part of the cruise industry, we are all partners in this, whether it's the person who is actually cleaning your cabin or us recommending what cruise line for you to go on. We are all in this together, and we are all suffering together because none of us have any revenue based upon what's going on with the pandemic. So we consider ourselves the partners of the cruise lines, and we are going to. One of the reasons I do this podcast, and one of the reasons I do all of this research all through the week as to what the status is so that I can better advise you as to whether it's safe, whether I believe it's something that you should be doing. We're going to be looking at each one of your personal circumstances and making recommendations about what cruise lines, what trips, what parts of the world you should be going to, or maybe that you shouldn't be going anywhere. And that's going to be, and I think I not only speak for Cruise Holidays Viera, I speak for all of the travel advisors. We are very, very concerned with your safety, your health, and your well-being. And you will have our commitment that we are not going to let you proceed unless we feel are the best guess that we can make, looking at all the circumstances of whether it's going to be safe to travel again. So I bring this up because it's going to be more important, I believe, in the future that you have a travel advisor on your side. And I would like to be that travel advisor. Cruise Holidays of Viera would like to be your go-to organization when you're considering travel. And we're going to do all of this at no additional cost over what you would pay if you go directly with a cruise line. If you go online, do your research, and then book directly with the cruise line, if we have another outbreak like this, if we have a mass amount of cancellations, good luck. It is taking us, even now, 6 months after all of this began, it's taking us 2.5 to 3 hours to get through to some of the cruise lines and resolve problems. And we're doing all of this for the benefit of our passengers and our past guests, even though we're not making any money for it. And that commitment will continue for you when you book with us in the future. We will be here for you whether you go on your trip or you don't. And that's the real advantage you get from having a travel advisor. Well, let's go to another subject besides the shutdown. Every week on Wednesday, we have a virtual call with the head of sales for Royal Caribbean Cruise Line, and that her name is Vicki Freed. And Vicki Freed is a long-time veteran of the cruise industry. She is a wonderful lady who is very dedicated to you, the cruiser, to us, the travel advisor, and to her corporation, Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines. I have met Vicki on several occasions. She is a very genuine person for being a very high-level executive in the cruise lines. And so every week she hosts a virtual call for travel advisors. And the purpose of the call is to bring us up to speed on what's going on with the cruise, with Royal Caribbean, to introduce to us different facets of the corporation that we might not have had time to consider in the past when we were all furiously booking cruises because the demand was there. And Vicki, last week, by the way, her call next week is going to be outlining the 74 protocols and how they impact us as travel advisors, which I think is a big plus, which might be another little step that we're getting towards reopening, because now we're going to be reviewing these protocols and seeing how they're going to impact us and how they're going to impact you, the cruiser. By the way, you were the third leg. I didn't finish my 3 legs. I said first leg was the CDC, second leg was the ports of call, and number 3 is you, the cruise traveler, and whether you're going to have confidence and to go back on board ships. And so those are the 3 basic obstacles I see to resuming cruises. Anyway, Vicki, on a previous call, just to give you an idea of what we do on these calls, she had with her a lady named Kelly Gonzalez, who is Royal Caribbean's Senior Vice President for Architectural Design, parenthesis, New Building and Innovation. So she is the lady that looks out and says, hey, this is what we want our cruise ships to look like 5, 6, 7 years from now, because that's how long it takes from when they start the initial design to where we get the ship actually comes to us and we put passengers on board it. She told a story on board on this virtual call we had, how they engineered a way to bring live greenery with trees and grass to ocean-going vessels. And some of you may have already guessed what I'm talking about, and that's the creation of Central Park on our Quantum class ships. She when she was on the call, she said that the story of creating Central Park as both a success story that became a failure story that became a better success story in the end. I know most of you have been on the Quantum class ships, and you know in the middle of the ship there is a central area there that has cabins. It's open to the air. The base of it has skylights, which are then open to the promenade below it, on the decks below it, and we have cabins that face into this space called Central Park. It is one of my favorite places on any ship anywhere in the world. One of the unanticipated things that happened, I think, for Central Park is a bunch of birds have now, or in the past, got on and were hitchhiking with the ship. And so not only did we have walkways with all of these beautiful flowers, there's a wall called the Living Wall, which has plants growing up about, about 4 or 5 stories high, 4 or 5 decks high. Where you can meander through. There are benches, and it's just a really serene part of the ship. It also affords you the ability to go from stern, bow to stern on the ship very quickly. So the Central Park's one of my favorite decks to book a cabin on, because you can go right out of your cabin door and move up and back and forth on the ship. Anyway, so Central Park, there's several restaurants at Central Park. There's the Central Park Cafe, which is one of the very finest places to have breakfast and lunch. The restaurants have al fresco dining available in Central Park, so they have little tables out in Central Park. There's Chops, the steakhouse. There's the 150 Central Park, which is one of the best gourmet restaurants, I think, on any cruise ship in the world. And there's Giovanni's Table, also, which is an Italian restaurant. There are shops on Central Park. Tiffany's is there now, and there are several other different shops. So Central Park is just a wonderful, relaxing place. But here's how it came to be, which I think was kind of interesting. And I'm going to pretty much read from the article, which is talking about Kelly Gonzalez's story. Royal Caribbean invited various architectural firms to submit ideas for what Royal Caribbean should do with the space on the ship. And the cruise line awarded the contract to a firm from the UK that came up with the idea for Central Park. So what they had was this space in the middle of the ship. It had cabins on both sides of it. It had structures at the end of it, and so it was an empty space. And they said, what could we do with this? And this firm in the UK came up with the idea of Central Park. When it first started, it had split atrium where you could look up the sky, and they then had the atrium view staterooms looking into it, as well as, so looking up, it's open to the sky, and that's what they're calling the atrium, as well as skylights that were on the deck on the bottom of the Central Park that brought daylight into the Royal Promenade. The original design was a series of rolling hills with grass, and a path. It had a pathway that ran around the rolling grass. The structural hills that were covered with grass with skylights on the side. Royal Caribbean had never done anything on a ship before that involved live greenery and trees and grass and things of that sort. So they brought in experts, including scientists from the University of Florida and landscape architects. Ms. Gonzalez recalled, we looked for a company that we thought would be really bringing the best expertise in a Caribbean environment and all of what that entails seasonally. We had to spend an extraordinary amount of effort working with structural specialists because we were literally putting these giant holes in a steel structure that typically is not perforated in any way. So the fact that we were breaching that with skylights was something that was very daunting for the conventional ship engineers. In addition, Royal Caribbean had to bring specialists to address the issue of bugs that live around these plants and implications of what happens when a ship pulls into a port and various local laws related to fauna. Royal Caribbean had also to address the ability to fertilize the plants and not overcomplicate the water system to the point of impacting the environment or ocean. Specifically, how could Royal Caribbean capture water runoff that might contain fertilizers? Well, if you ever look closely at Central Park, and that's what I love to look behind the scenes, but they have a whole series of misters, and then they have below the plants are all kind of in trays that collect the water so that it goes back out and then it's recycled. Back to the article. A major hurdle for Central Park was the rolling hills concept. There was a lot of uncertainty about grass living in an environment where the sun really had an apex high sky for a limited number of hours. So in other words, you didn't get full sunlight. You only had a few hours when the sun came in through that square, which was the opening in basically the atrium. Now, many of you know we've had grass on board celebrity cruise ships. The Solstice class ships introduced a half acre of grass on the 15th deck, and that happened before the Quantum of the Seas. Now, I always thought that was done to be an experiment for the Central Park greenery to see if that could be grown on a ship, but I was wrong. That was just totally Celebrity's concept, and it also got a lot more sun than Central Park does. Okay, so they had a limited number of hours a day. To tackle the idea, they constructed a piece of machinery where they mocked up the hills of grass with real grass on it. They then created a machine with a long axle of a car that had wheels on it. These wheels had shoes lined around the rim of the wheel that was simulating people walking up and down the grass down in the atrium. They then simulated the lighting effect to reproduce the conditions that allowed for limited daylight. So they wanted to find out how would the grass grow, how often would it have to be watered, and how would foot traffic up and down be on the grass. Ms. Gonzalez summed up the experiment by saying, well, to make a long story short, that task failed. So the test showed that regardless of what species of grass that was used, and no matter what they would do with fertilizer or any watering or anything else in this atrium, the grass was not going to be a surviving concept. Not only had the test failed, but it was right before Christmas, and the team had reached a point where they had to go back to the drawing board. The team spent 4 weeks over the Christmas holidays working in their London office, rethinking the concept of the design and to change it drastically, keeping in mind that time was not on their side. Eventually, they settled on the idea of a Central Park that looks a lot what it does today, with more flat walkways and having the skylights actually stand up into the sky. One of the skylights is actually the boarding and disembarking area for the Rising Tide Bar. It comes up right into Central Park and into one of the skylights. Anyway, so grass was not going to work, and what they decided to do was go with a series of walkways with regular plants being planted alongside the walkway so that it wouldn't get the wear and tear of walking. Ms. Gonzalez continues, and I think the Central Park is a story of how we ended up actually in a better place with a design than we thought